Hey guys, Rudi back here with part 2 of the week 10 GUI tutorial for CSSE1001 and 7030. If you have no idea what's going on, go back and check out part 1 of this video. Maybe I'll drop a link in the description or something if I remember. I'll give you a solid 50-50 odds on that. But anyway, we did the first half of the shoot just then. Set up all the toggle on the preview button and the label setup. And so now we're actually going to look at drawing these lines that we were told we were going to be doing. So let's see what we got here. Modify the program so that when the user clicks in two locations, the app will draw a line between those 2 points. Okay, so like boom, boom. Third and fourth click should draw a second line. 2 further clicks should draw a third line, and so on. Okay. How do we do that? Bind a method to button 1 to find out when the mouse is clicked. You may need to create attributes in the class to store certain information. And yeah. Okay, cool. And then we've got this canvas.createLine method to actually create the line. So let's go down to our drawing app. Okay, so we want to bind something to button 1. Now, button 1 is the left click, the primary click on your mouse. So what it's saying is if we were to bind something to the canvas for button 1, this function that we put there will get called every time we left click on the canvas. Okay, so let's sort of try and follow a similar sort of naming scheme here. Event click. Okay, so now in theory we've bound the self event click to the we've bound self event click to left click on this canvas. Okay, so let's just set that up. Def event click. You know, some sort of doc string here, I guess. Someone should get on that. And just to sort of test what's going on here. Oops. Oh, geez, the typos. Okay. So in theory, we have bound left click to our canvas, and we should be printing. Okay, so let's see how we go. Well, that's a whole bunch of red, isn't it? What have I done? Okay, so I just got really confused for a while there. We're gonna cut that, but essentially I forgot to put this little closed bracket in here, guys. Let's little ignore all this red text we got over here. No one saw that. Okay, F5. Okay, so every time I click on here, woo, we made a team. We made it. Our event click is working as expected at the moment. Okay, no one look at all that red. So what would have we got here again? So what we want to do is every time we click, we want every second click to make a line from the first click to the second click, and we want to do this using the canvas create line method. You may need to add attributes in the class to store certain info, such as whether or not the user has made the click and where that click was made. Okay, so let's have a bit of a think about this. In our event click, right, I'm going to get rid of this print now because we know we made it. But essentially we want to set up some sort of condition here. Because there's two kinds of click, right? There's the first click and there's the second click. Okay, so there's two cases, exact same situation as our button toggling before, right? We got ifs, we got either it's the first click or it's the second click. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to set up another attribute in our class again. Right? Basically, are we on the first click? Okay, because now when we come down here, we can go, cool. Is it the first click, or is it the second click? Or basically, has the user done a first click? Is probably a better way of wording this actually. So this is no click yet, and this is first click has been made. Okay, so in other words, we're on the second click here, and the first click here. Okay, so let's start down here. This is the easy one, right? In the event that we're doing this, oh wait, no, sorry, this is the easy one. You know it's all easy after a while. But essentially, on the second click, right? What do we want to do? It's easy to think about what we want to do, right? For the second click, we want to draw the line. Okay, so how do we actually draw the line? We use the canvas's create line method. So let's go down here and set that up. Our canvas. We want to use the was it create line? Create line method. Right now, what does the create line method take here? looks like it's taking two tuples, an XY and an XY coordinate. So something along the lines of that. Now let's think. We have the event, right? And we know from when we did event motion that we can use the event X and Y to figure out where we're drawing our line. Now the second click would give us the second pair of coordinates, right? That's actually a very misleading comment. I'm just gonna simplify this down. Second click, first click. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so since this is the second click, its event X and event Y should form the second part, right? It's where we want to draw the line to. So event X, event Y. Right, but where are we going to get our first click from? Oh, geez, I just spoiled it, didn't I? Where are we going to get our first point from? Man, I'm all over the place today. Well, that's going to come from here, right? Because what's the significance of that first click? We don't want to draw a line or anything, right? But we do want to know where we clicked so that when we come back to the second click, we can successfully create the line here, right? So in our first click, we need to store where we clicked, okay? Now, we could make a separate variable, right? Self.clickPos, okay? And we want that to be the tuple, right? Where we want to store where we clicked. So we would just store the X and the Y in this guy. And then what we can do later on is come into here and put self.clickPos, right? But I'm going to try and be a little bit tricky here. And I'm actually going to use first click as the same variable. Because then what we can do is we can come up here and we can put self.firstClick as the oh no. Right, and we can put self first click, because what we're basically saying is, cool, if it's the first click, store the first click. Then if it's the second click, come in here, right? And what that basically means is, instead of setting this first click to be true, I'm actually going to set it to be none at the start, right? Basically, how do we have the first click? No, we don't. It's nothing. And then what we can do is we can go, well, if the first click is not none, then it must be this. Maybe a better way of doing this would be to do the first click, then the second click, but then that probably would have been a better way of doing it. I'm not going to change it now because imagine if many people following along, I don't want to screw up their code, but probably a better way would be to have the first click, then the second click, because that kind of just makes more sense. But you know, we're going to keep going with this. So essentially what we're saying is, on the first click, store our first click. Then when we get to the second click, we want to create a line from whatever our stored first point is to our current point. Okay, let's see how this goes. Click. Cool, nothing happened. Oh, line. Boom. Okay, let's try making more. Oh. Okay, so every point seems to be stemming from, every line seems to be stemming from the same initial point. We can't seem to keep clicking with that. Okay, so that suggests our first point is never actually changing. So if we come back here, we want this first click guy to be reset every other time we click. Now, it doesn't look like this bit of code here is being run again, right? So let's sort of follow it. We set it to none at the start. So we come down, we go through here, we go to the else because it is none. We set it, and then we come into the is not none, and we create the line. And now from every time we come through here, right, the first click is not going to be none because we've already created the line. So in order to keep creating lines, we need to go, wait a minute, we've already made the second click. We need to rewipe the slate, right? So we're going to reset our first click to be none again, thus sort of resetting it back to the sort of starting state. And, right, let's do some pretty, it's a masterpiece. Okay, so we can see every second click, we get it reset back to none. So we go click, first click gets set, second click, right? We made our line, and then we unset it so that we can repeat that behavior over and over and over and over again. Awesome, awesome. I need to see where I'm going. Well, you know, it's an opinion, but Modify the program so that after the first click, the user will see a preview of the line which follows the cursor, but only if the preview is set to on. Okay, so basically we want to sort of click once and then we want to have it sort of stretch out from this point and follow us around. I could probably boot up Paint and show us, but I'm just going to assume you guys roughly know what I'm talking about. Pretty big assumption on my part most of the time, but we're going to keep going with this. Okay. One way to accomplish this is to first add a method which deletes all items on the canvas, then redraws all items that should be present, right? And you have to keep track of all our lines as we go. Another way to do this is just to change the coordinates of the preview line whenever the mouse moves. I personally like this method. This sounds a lot more my style, as opposed to sort of redeleting and rewriting everything every time. So I'm actually going to go this way. Essentially, a canvas has this guy, the dot coords method, which allows us to redraw and alter an existing thing on the canvas, right? So when we create these lines belong to the canvas. And what we can actually do is we can store the returned value of the call to create line, and this will give us an ID. We can then call canvas coords with that ID and alter its points as such. Okay, so let's sort of think about how we would start getting into this. For starters, we need to know when this is preview guy is on, right? Because we only want to update it when the is preview on is true. Now, if you guys remember, the is preview guy was actually part of our settings frame. Okay, and we actually wrote this guy is preview on. We wrote this method here to actually tell us from our settings frame whether it's on or off. So a lot of forward thinking has gone into this, and I think we're going to be able to save ourselves a bit of time with this, right? So in order to know if preview is on, we need to go first from our app into our settings frame, and then from our settings frame into the is preview on. Okay, so let's have a bit of a think about this. We want the preview to happen when we move our mouse around, right? Because we want the line to follow our mouse as we move. So we're going to have to do that in our event motion, right? Because that's the thing that's bound to motion on canvas.bind. So in here, we want to have some sort of check for whether we're in preview mode or not. Okay, so as I was saying before, we need to go through our settings frame because that's where our stuff is. And then we want to call the is preview on method that we made in part 1. Again, check that out if you didn't already watch that video. So this should tell us if our preview is on. Okay. Now in the event that our preview is on, what do we want? We want to update this line that we're dragging around. Okay. Now at the moment we actually don't even make the line until the second click. So we're probably gonna have to slightly change the way we're doing some stuff here. So let's actually have a relook here. What we want to happen now is instead of only creating the click on the second line, if we're in preview mode, we actually want to create the click. We want to create the line on the first click, right? So that we can sort of alter it and drag it around before we sort of finalize it with a second click. So how are we going to do this? Well, you know, let's always just start off with some sort of working solution, then we'll try and refine it afterwards. So on the first click now, if self._settings is preview on. So if our preview is on, we want to actually create a line. Okay, and now since we want to be able to edit this line, we need its ID. Okay, so I'm going to have to store this ID so that we can get access to it in the event motion. Now, since these are in two different functions, we can't just store it as a local variable like this because we need it to have access here. So we're going to have to store it as a self property. Tabbing, so everything's moving horribly out of the way, but you can sort of see that I'm basically just I'm just creating a new line here. Now, since this is the first click, we're actually not, well, we have access to first click, right? The first click is the exact same as event X and event Y. And what do we actually want to do here? We want to make a, wait, why inside brackets as well? Sort of set of double brackets happening here. Did I have that up there as well? I did do that up there. Don't need that. Self is already a tuple. I mean, not self, first click is already a tuple. Cool. Now for our event X, event Y guy down here, what we're essentially doing is we're actually mapping a point, or sorry, we're mapping a line from the one point to the same point that it's already on. Because when we click initially, even though we're dragging the preview, we sort of want it to start off as a tiny little dot. And then as we move our mouse away, we then want the line to sort of go with it, right? So we're creating this line just on the spot, right? From the first click to the first click. So just dot, and we've got a little dot there, and that's all we've got, right? Then when we come to the motion, what we basically want to see is if we've got this self.settings guy and we have a line, we want to move the line, right? It's worth noting that self.line here, we should probably initialize that up here somewhere. Now, since at the start we don't have a line, I'm just going to set that to be none as well. None's generally a pretty good initialization value, unless you already know what your thing is going to start off as, right? So if we're in event motion and the preview is on and we have a line, so line is not none, none, right? Then we want to redraw this line in the correct place. So let's just get that guy in here. So we have our canvas. We're using its coords method to alter the coords, and now we need to sort of think about what we want to put in here. Now our ID, since we have the line that we drew, because we saved the ID down here, we should be able to put in self._line. Just getting a drink, okay? Now what do we want to update its points to be? Well, we want the X1 and the Y1 to stay the same, right? Because we want it to still be whatever our first click was. Now, since we're storing first click inside our class as we go, we can actually just keep using first click. So X1 and Y1, we are going to replace with first click 0 and first click 1 to get the X coordinate and the Y coordinate respectively. As for where we want to update the second part of the line, well, that's just wherever we are at the moment, right? So our event. So we can pass through event X and event Y. So now what should happen is if our preview is on and we have a line that we've started drawing, whenever we move, right, we should update this. Okay, let's see how that goes. Here comes wall of red text, probably. Oh, look at that. Look at that, right? Now let's try and click. And there's the red text. That's what we're after. Okay, cool. None type object is not subscriptable. Okay. Now this is actually a very sort of clear error message, right? So subscriptable means when we try and put these guys after it, right? We try and subscript with a 0 or a 1, or we try and index it. And it's saying that none is not subscriptable. And it's in this part here as well. So we can basically see that first click is being set to none, right? And therefore we shouldn't be coming into here, because let's have a think about this. After I made the second click and kept trying to move around, right? Let's actually do this again. So I clicked once, then we were all good. I clicked again. Now the moment I start moving, it's giving me the error message, right? Now, it shouldn't even be trying to do this the second time through, and that means there's something wrong with our if statement here, because it shouldn't be trying to do this the second time. So let's just close that down. So what we're saying is it's still coming into here on the second click, and that actually makes me think we need to rethink this line. And what probably a better thing would be is if we're in the settings and we're on the second click, okay? So I'm actually going to change this to be self.first click. Can I set that up like that? Is Python going to yell at me? Ah. Get that backslash in there. Okay, cool. So now what we're saying is if the preview is on and it's not, and we're only on the first click. Okay, so cool. Still just clicking and dragging. Oh, there we go. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, let's just. Oh, how am I going to make a circle? Ah, yeah. Okay, we're done here. Cut the film. So let's have a bit of a sort of recap of what's going on here. On the first click, right, we had our first click guy as none. So we go through, and if the preview's on, we then set up some stuff as we do it, right? If the first click is not none, we're then creating a line where we are at the moment. Okay? So it's worth actually noting here that at the moment we're kind of doubling up on lines. Because what's actually going to happen is we click once, right? I'm moving this guy around. So this is my self._line that we set here, right? And we sort of update them with event motion. And then when we click, we stop updating this guy. And we've actually created this line here, and we've sort of kept going with it. Okay? And then when we first click again, we've overwrite self._line with the next guy, and then we keep going. Click, click. Okay, and you see it's first perfectly functional. So let's see what happens if we turn preview off. Click. Oh, nothing's happening. Click. There's our line. Click. Click. There's our line. Okay. Now I'm going to stress here that there are, just off the top of my head, I can think of probably 4 or 5 different ways of doing this implementation of preview that we've just talked about. So definitely don't feel obliged to sort of copy exactly what I've done and go, oh no, my solution's wrong, right? Because there are heaps of other ways. I think even the sample solutions that we released for this actually did this a different way. I haven't checked them out too thoroughly, but I'm pretty sure they sort of followed this kind of approach. Okay, there's also this approach that we just implemented. And another thing you could do is actually try and individually delete the line and redraw it every time, right? Using the canvas's delete method, which would actually be really similar to this. But I'll leave you guys sort of you can sort of go off on your own and try and implement that different solutions as you want, right? Now let's just set here. Depending on what information is stored in the class, you may need to modify the clear method to reset this information. So it looks like we basically need to have a clear method in here. Delete all the lines from the application. Self._canvas.delete. Okay, so in the event that we've cleared everything on our application, let's just have a quick look at our variables we've set up here. Since we're clearing, we would probably want to delete all traces of our first click. So we would want to set first click back to none. And we certainly want to set line back to none, right? Because otherwise, if we try and clear everything and then move our mouse around, it might start trying to redraw using the canvas codes, right? It might try to start updating it. So we definitely want to reset these guys here when we clear. So let's click. Woo. Preview. Preview off. Preview on. Okay, it's worth noting there's probably a lot of edge case stuff here that I might not have considered. What I'm thinking of now at the moment is what happens if I go preview off and then turn it on. Oh, okay, cool. Okay, that's pretty nifty. I actually didn't really think about what that would do. What if I go preview on and then turn preview off? Ah, see, there we go. Ah, we don't want that, right? So I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you, the viewer, to try and fix up what my mistake was there. I'll tell you that it's definitely something to do with the fact that I don't try and sort of reset this line when we're done moving it, right? We just sort of create a new line over the top. So you would probably want to have something along the lines of if not preview going in here. Or potentially trying to delete this line afterwards. But like I said, I'm going to leave that up to you guys to try and sort out, because I think that's basically everything else we covered in the tute. Yep, sweet. Okay, cool. So, like I said, as always, got any questions, drop them in the comments. I try and check this fairly regularly. Otherwise, post on Piazza or, show a tutor in one of your practice or something if you've got any questions. This is definitely a really good tute to try and get down for assignment 3, because assignment 3 is definitely a ramp up in difficulty. So definitely make sure you check this out if you're having trouble with the sort of general concept of assignment 3 in terms of interacting with a GUI. And otherwise, I will catch you guys next week with a new video.